Mega ju xie wo dong mi de nu be jin lang zhe wo pin bong zhe zhen pe zong zong yu ne da xie yu za xie pe xie zhe xie me do cha ri ra lin jie nin de yin ba sang jie xian do mian jie wu wa yin zhu ge nan da xian xue bo zhu yi la ma wu ru ra na ma le la wa ni ya da ya mi
san jie xue da zo jie zhe na la shang jiu ba da ne jia zi da ge jian zi ye le de da la ben de san jie zhu ba xiu san jie xue da zo jie zhe na la shang jiu ba da ne jia zi ye da ge qu jie ye be so nang jie da la ben de san jie zhu ba la xiu san jie xue da zo jie zhe na la shang jiu ba da ne jia zi ye da ge qu jie ye be so nang jie da la ben de san jie zhu ba la xiu 강계 도대 년에 돈에 다와 돈에 번도 저러 돈에 전에 돈 저거 거동은 될라 자대로 강계 도대 년에 돈에 다와 돈에 번도 저러 돈에 전에 돈 저거 거동은 될라 자대로 대양 톱잘라나 매바 양다고 저기 선제지 공부하는 거 진짜 톱으로 자 톱으로 자위 절도 자위 송으로 던지지 내도 봐 장조 남rin 첨뭐 I
would like to remind all of ourselves to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it bodhicitta motivation, or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should all participate in this Lamrim teaching on the stages of path to enlightenment that brings together all the essential points of practice.
Why that? Sanja temperature is tamni. Marato Hagdong Chamu, Kajangunti. A march that on look at Kajango, so I said Sajitania and China, it's it. Teta Nabotavotala Kaja de Hiena, de Hiena Joramature, Kajala Tontom, Gitavra Java, in some yore. Da Ranluka Kajating, most sympathetic, Rotar Kuche. 다 대기하는 저런 매저로 돼야 되는데와 대다야 대각자 하서와 대각자 현을 저런 매저로 주니 세야지와 다 대기 담대 비되어와 다 다대 가르쳐 기어잖아 다 각자 토디 공도 해버나 현게 토려 각자 다 나라도 그 가르쳐 그러다 랑케 쪼바세한데 랑온 쪼바세한데 돈 탐브라 쪼바세한데 담브라 쪼바세한데 아니 양 담브라 쪼바세한데 가제네 톡디 샤게 알아봐. 안다 란주비 면제게 내 숨듯이. 다 뒤택 말 란주비 면제게 내 숨듯 희샤세. 산내 숨지 민도버를 쳐가지. 다 뒤네 대마단데 텐지와 있나? 내 조가를 민도와 쳐가지. 제장 다디 각자디 컨디션 자고 그래서. 근데 각자 뒤에 조부티 아니 현을 저런 메절 세바디. 예 컨디션을 자고요. 컨디션을 자고요. 말에 젠다. 뒤반도 보지 마. 숨게 있어야지.
So we are back to continue our discussion on special insight section or the Vipassana section from this great Lamrim text. And as you may recall, that a major outline which we laid out some time ago is this: identifying objects of negation, or Gakjang Nguyen in Tibetan. And so under this, there are several subpoints, and of which we already discussed how do we precisely identify objects of negation in our own school of thought or in our own system. So we have already talked about that. And so now we are moving to another subpoint, which is on page 215, volume number 3 in English translation of the Lamrim text. And the subpoint reads, when to add qualifications to other objects of negation. Okay? And just to remind you what this point is going to be about is, as we have seen in different schools of thought, in regards to what is being refuted, we have seen the use of different terms, terminologies, such as intrinsic existence, existing by way of its own characteristics, or true existence, or existing essential in and of itself. So there are so many terms being used in different schools of thought. So it's important for us to be able to understand how those terms are used in in Buddhist schools of thought. For example, schools below Savatandika Madhyamikan school of thought. And how are these terms used in the Prasangika Madhyamika context, And there are as many as 6 those terms being used. And those terms become very important. And the discussion that we are going to have today is, when do we use those terms to qualify the objects of negation? Or when do we can sort of skip the adjectives and just, talk about things? So that's going to be our major subpoint today. So we are on, again, page 215.
도치. 다디 가르치기 어서는 공부 시에 각자티 그와 자사도부터 근데 갑리. 유미 탐제의 자초를 해당 말이. 걔들 요도 총나에 아니 아직 유단 뒤단 된데 내가 뛰대. 탐제의 자초를 해서 대초가 말에 송도가 돼. 안디 라빙 날 세부도 같은 마스로나. 람빙 대도와. 간데세는 달 람빙 시야 제비는 대세비는 다디 매번 자초가 말이 가게 돼서도 러봉그라다 뭐 좀지 불러서 봐 때네 매번 나라 대 매도시 마바나 케브라티 잘 미고 봐 대신도 러봉그라다 뭐 좀지 불러 속에 나다 그게 제비는 난게 믿어다 다 간지 때네 매번 탐제 디날 송초고요래 탐제다 걔도 요도 쪽장서 도가다 대신도 아니 시잘라 요도 시잘라 유정 아니 유등 가책당 유등 가전에 유랑 가책네 매바 아니 남라냐 유두 대단 대래 아니 대래 매바 주바 낭 케브라테 자미고소 다 때문에 다들 뭔가를 서 때문에 남나 잘 먹어 와 기샤지 다 때나 자고가 말이지 야 유등 가책게 유등 가책라 제 야제 유지 원게 제 메도 고금다 빼말라서 봐 미겨wan다고 야 뒤게 온게 야뒤스 잘라 군디스 미겨wan다고 근데래야 가자던도 아니 던도 라봉다도 차샤비네 매매버도 차잖아 라봉다 쳔 돈담bre 미겠대 매비처럼 템이 많이 비쳤을 때 자고 말했을 때 자고 말했을 때 야 유튜브 가실 잡이네야 아니 군디스 빼만 미겨왔지 아니 가래 뒤게 온게 레디어 때 얘기야 말이 미제바 레디 임베이나야 될 자고 그래 뒤공가 저디 라시치트베 빠마미케테 아니 남기 시장 남기 담모임 비쳤다 따고비나 남기 하장 담모임 비쳤다 따고비나 될 자고 민두스리 될 가자티 자고 민두스 어때 될다 매발라 자면고 간제 요디 축장 자면고 지네 가동이 대 축도스
So we are towards the bottom of page 215. The caption reads, when to add qualifications to other objects of negation. So what Khensur Rinpoche has just explained is these 2 things. When we don't have to use those qualifications or adjectives, as I said, right, such as intrinsic existence, true existence, and all other things, when we don't have to use. Two things that where we don't have to use them are, number one, anything that doesn't exist at all, we call non-existence, mepa. In the Buddhist literature, the examples of something that doesn't exist at all are horns on a rabbit's head, okay, or a barren woman's son or a child, okay, because barren woman is not supposed to produce children, so. Or we can say something like, for lack of a better word in English, called sky flower or something, namge meto. So these are examples of non-existence. So we don't need to use qualifications to talk about these things. For example, as Khensur Rinpoche has stated, let's say in a debate courtyard, you don't put this in a syllogistic form like horns on a rabbit head, for instance, which is the subject topic, right? Does not exist intrinsically in and of itself because it hasn't been perceived validly to exist that way. Well, you really don't need to do that. You don't need to use qualifications there. The second case where you don't need to use the qualifications are where things exist occasionally, at different times or in different places, circumstances. One example given in Khensur Rinpoche is, like, say, we can say that a lotus flower grows at certain season, but it really doesn't grow during the hard winter. Okay. Now you don't have to say, like, lotus flower, for instance, does not exist intrinsically in the winter because it's too freezing cold. We don't have to use that kind of reasoning in a debate here. So the two things where we don't use qualifications of such kinds are something that doesn't exist at all, right? Complete non-existence, and something that exists occasionally at different times or under different circumstances. Okay.
condition charcoal session. Alternate but the mixo choice and at the new choice and at the country, mixo and make the Nava not got tango ya, they leave that if can get the unbutton to figure out mixo choice. Don't number can let me get there. You be church. Hina, a conawad weird, Omar you got a nawad weird. Don't tamper around the wheel, Marta. Don't tamper matute, say I did the crew, Kabuchum Yartan, the wheel, Marcoran, Mindu, but the task good. Any to get Mandu task, Dova, Nipke Cartata, Mandu task, and Dova Carta Chujan say on that. Or can't you hear the machete, teach I or it. Omar and you will teach our Matula, Ranching Matupete, and about Rangun Matupete, charge you on Maris. Gustavani and do it maybe in that teller. You could object Masochi, zero chigimaris. Now I'm madam to case degrees. Tell could don't tamper Matupa the coup, kill and over Yeta, and a mixo church, Dali make it, don't tamper make it, don't tamper Dali make it, you be Sarasabina, and I could now under it. Magic word. Can you attempt don't tamper Dali Matupana? Ranching Matupana, the nature Katie Arba, Ranjuba didn't check the but thank you, Amara, Coranto Yavachi. I don't tell you what Keva Son not any mass, Mixo Church, Tom Tamper, Tale, Bichette, Tom Tamper, Kenley, Michete, you be edged Govina, now I do it, or take up color, what in the char cotton dona, in the charge of Mother Julia, Ranjuba Kipana, now I'm Madame Mondo at Talco, your marriage, and what is Sungi is.
So in the middle of the bottom paragraph on page 215, where you read a sentence that starts with, furthermore, when refuting imaginary constructs from the unique assertions of Buddhist and non-Buddhist essentialists, things that the Madhyamikas do not accept as conventionally existent, there is no need to newly attach the qualifications essentially or intrinsically to the objects, except in some occasional situations when you should add it, taking into account the opponent's perspective. Now, the explanation given of that whole long sentence is, there's another case where, we may not have to use add qualifications, that is, for example, when we are debating with, let's say, with either non-Buddhist schools of thought or within Buddhist schools of thought, where they accept that things exist intrinsically, things exist truly. For example, Sevatandika Madhyamikans, like our own school of thought, and schools below, they accept there is such thing as intrinsic existence, Rangshinji Drupa, or there is such thing as true existence, Temper Drupa. So if we are debating with them again, we may not use those qualifying terms like intrinsic and true existence. That's because why? Because it doesn't sit well with them, to start a debate. The example Khensur Rinpoche has given is, let's say, anything that exists. We can talk about eyes and ears and nose, whatever, right? Or the sprout. Sevatandika Madhyamikans believe there is such thing as what we call production from others, shinje, something that's produced from others. But in this acceptance, what they're saying is that things are produced intrinsically from others or by others. So that's their position, isn't it? So that's their acceptance. And so in order to refute that notion, you're not going to debate with the Sevatandika Madhyamikans. For example, like a sprout, for instance, is not intrinsically produced from others because we're not going to debate with them saying that a sprout, for instance, does not fit into this other production, for lack of a better word, right? Production from other. I need a simple word to say, not the whole sentence. That drives me nuts as a translator. Tibet is shenje. Then I'll be like, production from the others intrinsically. Just goes me nuts. But anyway, so let me simplify it. Okay, sprout, for instance, does not fit into other production because it does not exist intrinsically. Well, Sevatandika Madhyamikas say like, wait. No. We accept intrinsic existence, so don't give me that, right? See, so you can't use a qualifying term in this particular situation, okay, if you will. So what can we do is, for there are other occasions we might use qualification terms, such as, we can say, Sprout, for instance, is not ultimately produced. Turn number, right? It's not produced ultimately because we're talking about ultimate existence. Why? Because it exists. Now that sits well with Savatandika Madhyamikans, because they think like, yeah, they don't accept anything exists ultimately. Are you with me? But according to Pasankika Madhyamikas, doesn't matter whether you say intrinsic existence, ultimate existence, true existence, existing by way of its characteristics, existing from its own, it all means the same thing. See that? So Pasankika said, okay, at least we can start a conversation. I said, sprout does not exist ultimately because it, then like, okay, yeah, we know, So that's how, there are occasions where we use the qualifying term. There are occasions we don't use the qualifying terms. Okay, I know this is getting a little, above our heads, maybe not your above ours, my head. So, yeah.
저를 믿고 대해서도가 대다라스 대다라 돈대 주버 돈대 주다 마와 대다 깨랑 다 란주 면제게 인지 면제 란현지 주바다 얘는 자고게 말해 제 마가테 돈 담바를 마두 자나 편주에 다는 또 내직도 너버 인상 직바 너버 인상 다돈 담바를 마두바 까비나테 란현지 마두바 튼데 아니 까도요 까도요 때 인지 면제 걸 만두베지 야 꼭때 그 말에 까도요 송가 대인사래 기직제 다디네서봐 대달 쳔베레 대달에 쳔바 엄마바 탄이 줘야 넘버는 거기 돈 남니 신라와 시기 대다 거기 까바스 깝소네 쳔바라테 마차르나 아니 공겐지 리바니라가 좀 총바른 도페 순지 따나든 줄베 식도 줄베 자르고서 송도와 그 공도 휴비 나겐게 매반 잡았다 요자에 유튜브 텔레 메디어 반다부터 또 자고 말이 대달이 셴베세야 돼 대면으로 상다봐 대달이 셴베세야 돼 대면으로 대달이 셴베세야 돼 디엘 자고 말이 대마도 지gle 양체 가장 그 깝까뒤이나야 다가트지 녀고 취지 매대 때문에 많이 셔야 돼 가자 맞아지 가기 때문이나 된거 두야 요 말에 숨고여서래 요 말아 봤다 녀고 취지 매대 때문에 매비 셔잖아 용거 말아 봤대 세상 텔레 가자 자고 그래 녀고 취지 빨나 돈 담바라 마두듯잖아 랑게지 마두때 시에네서 자르고는데 가자도 자고 숨고여서다 가자도 자쇼 개띠때 맞아봐이나 아니티 공경게 르파코란 텐디 치고 그러와 밀파 텐디 치고 가뉴고 치지 돈 담바 달 맞게데 유베처센다바지 텐디 고 막고 제비네 티 자비인 맞아봐지는 거비나 텐디 르파코란레 누그리스 르파코란레 르파 양다 매브제 르파 타나 레디유다 그 같이 자용 그래 투 칼로 제오나 야 르바텔라 때 칼레 가고 차고요 레스 그거다 르바텔라 칼레 가고 차고요 지레스 공개지 르바니라가 저르 좀 총바르 조베스 그대 르바 양다 매비니 제 르바 타나르 버지 그 비나 마자르 버지 그 비나 르바 타나레 르바 타나지 리바 인단티 고 두기요 말에 마테베 순지 아니 타나 유르버소 제당 공개기 르바테 가도 파베 아니 디 가르도다 르방 공개기 치고티 르바 거랑 딘데진 투 가지로비나 르바 타나도 해요 그게 자효스 다 간제도 해는 마지는 콘디 해바 대달이 현백게 니 가자 컵 간데지 미데야 때 라지지 메데스네한다 돈 담바라 메데스기나 가자티 자르고도 티 어디 숨겨었다
So now Khensur is explaining the last line at the bottom page 215 and the first line on page 216 on the top. So what we have really discussed so far is this, that if something doesn't exist at all, right, which is called complete non-existence, there is no need to use qualifying terms here. We don't say that horns on a rabbit does not exist intrinsically because, nobody validly perceived it. You don't need because it doesn't exist at all. Okay? Or that we don't use the qualifying terms with regard to those which exist occasionally, right, at different times or under different circumstances, such as lotus flower that grows, seasonally, but at different times we don't have to say that, we don't have to say a lotus flower does not exist intrinsically in the winter because it's freezing cold. We don't, need to do that. And another place where we don't use the term is like Sevatantric Madhyamikans and some other schools of thought where they do exist, that if something exists, it must exist intrinsically and truly, then you don't use the qualifying terms. Like, you know what, sprout, for instance, does not exist intrinsically because, right, then they're like, no, we accept that it exists, right? So we don't. So where we use the term that a sprout, for instance, is not produced ultimately from other things because, you know, it has not been validly perceived. Okay? That works because Prasangika Madhyamikas think that nothing exists ultimately. Okay? And whereas for, Sevatantrika Madhyamikans, what I'm saying. Sevatantrika Madhyamikans do not accept that anything exists ultimately. So therefore, when you debate with them that something does not exist ultimately, then they like it. Yes, now you're with us, right? Whereas for Prasangikas, ultimate existence, true existence, intrinsic existence, objective existence by way of characteristic, whatever, blah, 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 all of that means the same thing. Okay? And now to continue that conversation for example, like there could be occasions like we cannot make a blanket statement in general, let's say that a sprout, a sprout does not exist because it has not been validly perceived to exist. Are you with me? A sprout, right? We can say it does not exist because there is no valid perception of that. We cannot say, because what happens is then we are denying the conventional existence of something. Okay? We are not into the business of undermining the conventional existence here. So therefore, it is necessary to use the qualifying term here, that a sprout does not exist intrinsically or in of itself or truly because, right, then whatever the reason you give. Okay? Otherwise, as we say, that our logic will become very flawed logic. You know, the reason we use become very fallible logic, reasoning. We call it ripatarnang, the reason that's not valid. So if we use a reason that cannot stand really test investigation, then that reason is going to bite you, Well, we don't say exactly that in Tibetan, but it means it's going to backfire, Then they will poke nose, yeah, your reason sucks, let me tell you that, right? So you don't want to go there. Like if you use a reason, you use a very infallible reasoning. It can withstand, right? You don't use some kind of reason, because then it's going to come back to you. Also.
Oh, yeah, Juribe Jargo so at the Kajal, the Chebra Jago, Checkwala. Diati Sham de Tisung to I am to talk about the Pemisi that I go soon of the Hebina. That me Kebatun the Hen, the Dacham should share you, Sarbanwa. In a that from the Hebina. Siaya not here but Tars. Umabe tiny to Jogbe Tonam la Sierra. Ranche you make it Jeve repat. Tan pena hin you got to Shabi and Omabe detail of Kajatun to maybe should choosing the years in Shago Yoraba, tiny to change the years. Tell you me, you got to Shash and I tell you the major cut the repair any Shan you of the you go around continue to button to make Shan you tell a no grandmother, you go on no ya your mares, no joke matter, no mares. You make repair the repatons, you go and change it about you, make you repatigi, you go tell a new rebetana, no mares on you say. They come to Masabe, tiny bit, teme, minuba, good as. Tagantable you go Tata children, you could stop and Pumbasun and Kay or Mother, tiny bit, teme, minuba, you got is. The Kaza car in the children, they repair no, tiny bit, teme, no, be enough. Ani to give your mares, don't get sorry. Then to give your mares. Oh, tiny bit, tame, minuba, you good as. That riba you make riba, you make riba mat, stuck it chain, a chair, and ribati, children, talane. Tiny bit, temeti, is a nobody in us, Tidamaina. Party, Tende Manasi, that you then you go on. You then you put Tende in Maina. Onjugla soba tani do ke milena ranju be tana ranju masa oma ba tanju be tana onjugla soba te den jiden ju go ba po ke leng mares oma onjugla soba jiden ju go ba po ke leng mares onjuk jitenji kuba po yin sig marwa tenju sige mare nangbe sig mare jitenji kuba po mayin sigre ke melela sugdalo sogba ane ke lembe kebra ten merong yes onjuk jitenji kuba po mayin yang sugdalo sogba tani tu ye sen keje ti ine namcha di tegi mare ribe no tani be teme no be yina tende keje di jikdene nga tu keje xebe na onjuk la sogba jitenji sibabu mayin se ya keje ti tegi mare sugdalo sogba ane ye sen keje ti tegi mare 가르치는 그 탄이도 각자티 유미 제운데 제베 리베리 뉘 따르리 된 탄이베 테메 뉘버리 어디니까지 민우바지 고그레 센타티 주된라 송기 살아봐 때 메롱웨 다티네 마지 휴비나 코란 데바 차고 데라봐 때 메롱웨 인덴라와시 람리 인덴라와지 람리 람kana khasa tami tawata chanju wisem ke sembata tende ke ya kombe ke thapki ni ji sembet ke lamre sen heya de yung ke mare tende no du yo na ya jin de rawa je lam mai nanga tamba de tesum somba la so ba thum che bi na ane che lamre be san lamre de mare ine koran to je lam ke ting ge or ba de lam mare che ta o de tetam ten ma che be ta de ni do la tetam du ma che be 두단 데 양 탁바 잡지리 잡아 두단 데 아니 태기리 양 탁바 태기리 데때도 메테도 해봐데 아니 태기 말에 근데 누구요나 티 태기 말에 라속 바에스 근데 지대단 지대는 데베 아니 남자 가야 시답 메페 지대는 데베 깨지 회사 있면도 근데 센체나 지대는 데베 깨지 회사 있면도 제가 라센제 동발라 콘데지 남자 탐제 대비 체주도 미로미처로 그랑 근데 세바 나킹긴 리베네 탄이베 테메 너신 추젠달 누구 때 제비나 제된단 제델은 대비 탑께지 해서 따와니 민두 나도 제된바 세야지 제델은 대비 세야지 그랑서도 간사야 이 간사 가서 때 람줄로 맞지베 그 제된바다 야 통놈 꼴놈으로서 제베 내가 복든 제델은 대비 지네 근데게 있는 남자한테 태기만도 송이다래 남자 탐제 태베 체주수 미로미처럼 들이 남자 태기리 키랑게 근데 도바 텐데 도비나 텐데게 남자데 태베 체주수 미로미처럼 what is 송이다래
So Khensur that whole long commentary is on the second paragraph from the top on page 216 and so Prasangika Madhyamigans, when they use reasoning or rationality to refute intrinsic existence or true existence of sprout or anything else, they are not undermining the conventional existence of things such as sprouts. What they are doing is they are simply negating what we call the intrinsic reality, the fabricated reality. It is not there. So by doing that, the purpose that's being served is that we are able to counteract our grasping at intrinsic reality or true existence. But at the same time, we are able to assert the conventional reality or the conventional existence of things. Okay, so that is a very important crux of the matter. Okay. As we enter into this kind of analysis or the investigation, we have to see that that our ultimate analysis does not destroy the conventional reality, and the conventional valid cognition does not contradict, the ultimate analysis. There has to be complementarity between these two modes of existence. Otherwise, we won't be able to, posit the two kinds of two levels of existence: conventional existence and ultimate, kind of existence, truth, reality. So we want to be able to differentiate between the two. Okay? And then it really becomes very messy. If we are not able to differentiate between that which is mundane, that which is super mundane, because of this contradictory notion of things, then our whole structure of the path will fall apart, right? When we talk about the difference between ordinary sentient beings and the transcendental beings, those who have gone beyond, the difference is understood in terms of our inner realizations. Those of us who have not yet realized ultimate reality non-conceptually, that means we haven't at least realized the path of seeing, we are ordinary sentient beings, right? We are stuck in our own situations and our circumstances. Those who have realized path of seeing, darshan mark, thonglam, and above, they are considered as transcendental beings because they have transcended the mundane sort of existence, right? So we're able to make those distinctions based upon that which is a path, correct path, and that which is not, correct path. But if we are not able to, I should say, relate to the two realities in a non-contradictory manner or the approach, then we will not be able to assert, right, the two levels of truths, So the point that Khensur Rinpoche has, made is, for example, like in certain schools of thought, there is acceptance of God, the divine being as a creator of things, isn't it? Okay, and in Hinduism, they often, they invoke the name of Ishvar, right? And there is the Ishvar, who created all of us. Okay, and so if that is the position we take, then there are a lot of valid cognitions which contradict that. How things arise from causes and conditions, isn't it? So it is not a comfortable position to be. That in one thing we said, well, there's a creator who created all of us. Everything that is happening is because of the creator. And then there are valid cognitions. We see that things are produced interdependently and through causes and conditions. Those two notions don't sit well together. They contradict each other. Are you with me? Okay. So in the same way, Prasangika Madhyamikans feel that as much as they would like to identify precisely what is the object of negation, in their case it's intrinsic existence or true existence, ultimate existence, or whatever, as my students love to say, as they do that, and they can use any object or a focus, right, to establish non-intrinsic existence. So a sprout is a very favorable subject. A sprout, for instance, does not exist in and of itself intrinsically because it is dependent arising, right? So in this logic, what we should understand is that Prasangika is refuting the intrinsic existence of a sprout, but they are not refuting the existence of a sprout. They know sprout exists based upon causes and conditions. It's a conventional existence, isn't it? So that reasoning is not damaging our conventional perception of a sprout. Well, there's this valid perception of a sprout, and sprout exists. That's fine, are you with me? But at another level, we say that there is no such sprout that we fabricated out there, Hey, hi, I'm here, right? That kind of sprout is not there. So through reasoning, when we say that kind of sprout is not there, so it really counteracts our grasping at the intrinsic reality of our sprout, not the conventional perception of a sprout. Okay, so this is how, I know, it's a lot of things, So welcome aboard, yeah. No.
Also, chiche, ta, kawandro song ya. Chesu zu mere chero che. Ta ya, samdu chigle khar song ya sana. Seme menu ja, ta da ngo param du na ne ta. Seme ta nu gu mare, ne ta ji khond kheba na yin. Repe menu tani be seme ta nu gu mere, yar te. Yene yang go gin se sona. Udong de jam go gin se sona. Ta te yung gu mare song ya sare. Seme menu ja ngo param du na ne kebe shege ji ne yin no. Kemo ya. Seme menu ja ngo param du na ne keba tu hende ya ta. Keba tu kemo ya ke ne ri. Se ma de chila yo ya ta wa ni yo mare song se. Tende yin ta teda lang go par song be kapsu chide chul tere song be teda lang go be kapsu ene song be kapsu ene tong me sa ba khebra te charwa chao nebar tu cha gu du kong de kheba na yin ge ka ge cha gu me ba o te ma do chi ge khebra te charwa chao chen song go sa res no.
So it is the middle paragraph on 216, where the sentence begins, to a skillful philosopher, it is ridiculous to claim that something is refuted even though such valid cognitions do not contradict it, and so on. So the explanation given on that is, when we talk about refuting something, that refutation is based upon, right, valid cognitions. If there is a valid cognition of something, then that something should exist. We cannot refute its existence. Okay? If something cannot be verified through valid cognitions, then that cannot exist, right? So without need to use the valid cognitions, if you simply go like, well, something doesn't exist because of whatever, then it becomes a very contradictory notion, because the way we can verify something exists or not is through valid cognitions. Whether there is a valid cognition that perceives it to exist, or if there isn't one, then we say that thing is a non-existence. Okay, so if we discard that notion and simply claim there's some other way to verify existence and non-existence, then it becomes a very laughing stock, laughable matter, because that's the only way to do it.
다 teaching 되고 시가 차셔. 다단다 켜버려 자고야 돼. 켜버려 자지 깨자만 거 해고야 돼. 야지 랑설도 버틴데 되잖아. 그 말이. 말이 가리 간디에서 랑설만 봐 근데 들이잖아. 그 히잡 값수 송도 와. 그러봐. 히잡 값수 히잡인 대바이게 값수에 근데 자고부터 송자지. 대담도 마세베 르바 주주변 대베 값이야. 가자랑 거고 켜버려 제바 아니 렉바 투주변 대베 가서 가장 거 받죠. 근데 제베 치 망도 송샤 디자고 버디 망도 송샤 다 간제 깨는 마치 디란송이 받지 말이 디자고야 디 흉망고 오메 흉망고니 통고도 송거야래. 자기기 흉다세다 자와시라제 대연대 법부터 빨리 다니버 대제 직세제 오마 죽받단데 뒤와 자르베 값 두만 자르베 값와 두만 나외 식도 샤와 식바당 되게 따다 그 장기 대비나 흉대다에 자로 자고 레체네 값송고 수송여러 가서 마송네 자르고 돈이 땡디와래 되게 차당지 되게 대비나 아니 이도 차와 이러봐 이도 천번 나외 이도 차와 이러봐 식도 차와 식바당 저런 뭐지 근데 이제 생네 흉대적인 고모도 모두 차당지 되네 말 뒤에 송고 있어래 이도 차와 송고 다서 식바당 마자라야 자와 남지 마자야 가와 남지 내지 또 하발로 공내 마자르 주소왕 제고바 마자르베 주소야 제고바 인데 마자르베 값수 자르고베 이러다 자르고바 인데 제고바 재미도와 잘 인다 얘기 체빈이라 자르고바 인데 대달라 쪼르 대달라 저런 저렇게 잡아 중세 좀 해배처로 제르다 그냥 흉 대다도 무슨 자르고래 담바도 봤어야 한다고 돈 담바 라케 줘 봐. 무슨 막고비나야. 야 돈이 톱도 하래. 자르바디 돈이 톱도 하래. 무슨 맞아버 레디나 돈 접게 제비나 그래 자르바디 레디 하래. 세다. 제가 디체운데 아니 보다 디 디디체 무슨 맞잖아. 디게라 돈 접게 자 톱도 하래. 대다 저름이 저렇게 개발 중세 매베 용 대단 세베인데 무슨 저러봤다 저러봐 간제 돈독게 톱도 요아래 무슨 저러나야 저러고 봤지 네 개발자 요 말에 전 송면도 개발 매베 처로 전 어직 송도가
So now we are on page 16, the middle paragraph, where it is stated this whole discussion about when do we add qualifying terms to the objects of negation or not, it is really based upon authentic treatises. It's not like we have nothing better to do, and so we created all this whole new thing about when to qualify, when not to qualify, because we have too much time at hand. And so therefore the source materials are cited here as for example in Chandrakirti's commentary on Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, there is mention about, right, when do we use the qualified terms, when we don't have to use them, and when sometimes even if the qualifying terms are not used, but still we should understand, what it really means, right? The same thing in many other texts, like commentary on the 60 stanzas of reasoning, okay, and or in the Arya Nagarjuna's, Madhyamika or the fundamental treatise, and then Buddha Palita's commentary on the middle way, And then there's the explanation of the middle way. So these are the authentic treatises where there's a whole lot of explanation about, when do we use the qualifying terms and when we don't have to use them. But in what context, sometimes even if the qualifying terms are not used, but still it is implied and we should understand it. Okay? And it stated that it becomes so, they said, if I have to explain all of these things here, it'll take too many pages to write about. It's going to be. So he said, I decided not to, keep going with that. So this is my footnote. Maybe it might help you. I thought example might be very useful here. So, for example, in a context where the qualifying terms are not used, but it is very much understood, it is there, is like say, Seventh-Tantaka Madhyamikans, for them, if something exists, it must exist intrinsically, isn't it? So if we are debating with Seventh-Tantaka Madhyamikans, we don't have to use the qualifying term that, well, does something exist intrinsically? Because in that context, it is understood. That's their assertion. If something exists intrinsically, well, if something exists, it must exist intrinsically. If it doesn't exist intrinsically, it doesn't exist at all. So in that context, we should understand that qualifying term is not needed. We know that. Okay? But in other contexts, we have to be careful because the positions have changed. So that's a footnote, my example there. Okay. No much.
Oh, that's it. 중세 좀 maybe 처로서야 되지. 다 양사르다. 하트네 양직 중도 하트네야. 현양 남바 제바나. 다 각자 신인데 담바도 안도 만도 쟁겐게 리파치 요러 왔다. 만도 레시 참아서 그래 왔다. 그만도 마서지 그만쇼서나 제제거려 봐. 제제거려 다 간제 셰드 마시 나나데 쟁겐게 리파치 좀게 쓰기였다. 쟁겐게 리파치 요러 다 리파치 요러 리파치 근데 요단 야 되게 쓰기였다. 현양 넘버 제바나 요바 마이노 넘버 제베 제바르 자르와 망도 중대 이 세기 말 가정고 참 자르면야 따동 때니 제운도 봐라 아니 니주 요버직다 니주 매버직 가정초 누구요 알아 제다 니주 매버직 되나 망도 송자 송게서래 용대 대양아를 해봐다라 랑게 ngotoba 인주 쩨베 리페 니 고발레 많이 배 요나야 만 따동 때베 르파티기 야나야만 니고리 요나 니고기 매네 매버지 타추고 그러 맞더라 유메 니에 많이 가르쳐 타 마저지 지야요 말이 가지 해는 마시나 가동 추고 요래 르파티 딘데 쳔이 르파티 그때 운도 랑게 ngotobe 인주 쩨베 르파티기 요나 니고그래 때 니가 민도아 간디직 수용 관리 때 따동 때는데 때비나 니야지 민도가 니 고발레 많이 배 때 많이 비인다 랑게 ngotoba 돈 매지 봐 임배 다랑게 ngoto바스나 랑을 줘봐 돈요 말이 랑게 ngotoba 라히 매지 자와다 아니 내 직도 똑바로 자대 랑게 ngo 랑히 매다나 랑게 템퍼 매다나 좀 내 직도 똑바로 자대 자대 가르에서는 히잡은 대발레스 다 리송도 타고도 다야 나랑 어떻게 면도 남바도 야고 여기서 히잡은 대발레스 개정업은 대다 개매 컬러 당 천안 경업보다 개매 컬러세도 부게라 왔다 개매세도 작바 찍은 거라 메다 마야 틱 매야 틱 된게지 마동체 되는 거절 매치 요더라 봐라 대인데 쓰는 똑바인데 쓰는 거르바이나 장을 찍다 되기는 가르 통그랬다 컬러 통그래 봐라 개매 컬러 통그래 컬러야 말이 피게 메다 되기 근데 지금 똑바 거르다 이제 개매 컬러 통버를 맞죠 가져올라티 컬러를 배잖아 말이 개매 컬러 다 찍지 tubală sopa tabu luie ya tube mal sopa chiwa mbra mangu tuni ma de chiwa mbra mangu tuni de lebina de dada chigi ma re de yerbetana tubre ma to chele de ye o mare tunjo gari chigresna simje lundu gres piyene ke college dog sam de tube tabata ta mikju chundin se atun de tikbar bata pige mikju ya GSTDL 탐록 등을 따인도 총과 시 주게와 통계어봐 리다다 나도 저래 통계어봐 다 대피게 추진도 섬제 용도가 제비나 피게 탐록도 맞도 줄 추도 매버 루송아 대단 루기야다 대단 게임에 콜로 거든 게 되게 근데 피게 콜로 독sen 제빈 텔루리 두베마 본다 망고 제텐데 센 두비게 잡이나 대 레선스 존도가 전에 리교 말때 두베마 레디어 대 제단티 두베마도 루예 센도와다 어 루예 ngobote다 메버 민주나네 저대 네버를 테버 넘버 제바나 어 데리다 tuzo lube ngobo teda meben juna ni ta ngobo teda yo maraba te meben ju ta de ago je kotu ge men de ina ta yu hyora bal ti de ngebar tebar number jeba na ta kari ne men ta ge chi hyo song re seje dai seje do lagbar ta la ngai ka lawan cha yu ku jir men te ta kor no kore na le 좀 de ye song la jeba jiro ji 수다 수인에 제바팅이 동네 인데 전에 히달라 쇼그를 마도 제일 제바탄에 마제베제 레공 젠도 서봐 레공 제게 레공 망고 제 이게 추나리 가리나 지금 잠이나 제 사선 진동 사선 어디 센디 동네 그 랭장게 젠 로신 버봐 어디나 기 젠도 제 죽제죠 말에서 제바 제구레서 디송도 제바 제구레서 그와도 그다야 네버죠 제바 제나서 제바 제나 살레 담나 속바 다 또체와 세와 리버라 주나 대단히 치로 점지 주제 임배 남저 죄배 아니 남버 죄배 매 색바다 랑게 뭐 메버라 이거라 많이 노다 간제 현이 맞거든 제바 지구레 떠나 세른다부지 임배이나야 녀옥도나 세른다부지나 세르테 세제 다숨싱이 지구레 lamsante ser re sen lamsan yoya cha yo mara ali ser re te me singite ser che ko yore tar ko yore mel stek ko yore che ba sum chi ya yore te nyo tu pube ke ser che yore ser re ta ngori ke karsa renje ka ka ina chil hyo puri de pomore khari na tuma lagan hyo ne chi tang ba che yo ma o te le ha chi ke leng gyo mara te pwa ting te che tang ba che yo ti khari ne ya ko te ma ta ha che ser sing te ne bala ser tam ta ne bala 세제 다숨 치고 대신도 근데 그 NP게 rinche salli tamji ujendi shaje jebu ulla chubai tindi rinche salli tamji adi serla sigyoare rinche salli tamji adi serla sigyoare odi tindi serti tamda yimba nyabala seje dasum chigo ba deshindu ane tundu 그 시간에 지금 쇼부이나 세제 다도 따라가봐 거 말봐 땡주기 실을 쇼부는 세제 다숨 제니 쇼구요래 제티 총부여서다 내가 때에 세제 살에 담나서 뭐 따라 치 뭐치 세와다 그 대체로 하다 개디 땡게적인 니자주 요번에는 시대도 누구라고 하다 땡게적인 니가 요번에는 세대 남다 니인데 세세르 세임 방 얘기라 봐 게메 콜로도 야야래 윤디 발다 콜로요 말이 팅 게메티에도 콜로 라ンド 여러 때나기를 시대도 도고는 누구 민도아 뭐 바로 주나티 신질로기 센텀지 주전인데 대티 디게메 콜론 팅팅게 두에 말만 디팅노 신질로기 인베 남버 주베 오야 다 메색바다 랑행오 메바다 민주로와 마이노 해송바 따로 센다 디바도 책레한테 책도야
So Khensur Rinpoche gave an explanation on the last paragraph on page 216, which is completed on the top of page 217. So which actually completes that second sub-point, when to add qualifications to the objects of negation. Okay. So what is really being talked about in this passage is if things were to exist just the way we thought they existed, then when we put them under ultimate analysis, the Tibetan term is called Tenzin, right? We're trying to find whether the thing exists just the way we imputed it to exist. Then if that's the way they actually exist, it should be findable under ultimate analysis. Okay? But when we put the things under ultimate analysis, we don't find it. It's not findable. Okay? So what does that tell us? They don't exist just the way we thought they existed. Okay? So the ultimate analysis is a very decisive kind of analysis. It will tell us exactly whether it exists that way or it doesn't exist that way. There's no third way around it. Either or, right? Okay. And so when we try to analyze in that way whether things exist intrinsically, essentially, objectively, just the way we thought they exist, at the end of our analysis, we don't find them to exist that way. It's unfindable. Okay? So that tells us that that's not the way things actually exist. They may exist in a different way. Okay? So that is the main point here. And so we may perceive the things to exist in one way, but they may not necessarily exist in that particular way. So there are a lot of examples given in Buddhist text. One is on page 217 on the top. It says, like the wheel of a firebrand. That's the translation of the Tibetan word called Gelme Kholo. Okay? And as Khensur Rinpoche starts to explain that, if you have a stick, which has some fire on it, and then if you're going to start to rotate it, like from a very great distance, it looks like there's a wheel, but it is just illusion, isn't it? There isn't a real wheel there. It's just, And what comes to my mind, if you allow me to add another footnote, but July 4th is coming, firecrackers are sold. Buy one of those, and then at light, you light and do that, you can see that exactly, the wheel, but it's not there. It's the illusion we created. Okay. The another example given is that of where it says, simply says an emanation. The explanation Khensur is given there is like, say, if somebody magically create whole army, of soldiers, sent to war, and if you really think they are real armies, well, we just duped. It's just how should I say, magical creation of that. It's not the real reality as it is. Maybe the better example is not in the here text, but as Khensur gave, it's just like we misperceive mirage as water, right? That's how animals often get really more suffering. It's scorching hot, and they're seeking water. At a great distance, there's a shimmering, there's wonderful water. Well, you go there, you get disappointed. It's just a mirage which appears as a water. And we Californians know that very well on our freeways, right? At least I have realized that many times. So that's what it is. Our perceptions are not necessarily valid, always. So what really that tells us is we really need to investigate realities. We shouldn't take things for granted as if this is how we see things, and what we see is the truth of the matter. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, and the example given here is that of how the famous quote Buddha gave. He said, "O wise men, O monk, bhikshus, and wise men, you should test my teaching just like the goldsmith tests the gold through three ways, cutting it, rubbing it, burning it. And so should you test my teaching, and if you are convinced, accept it. Don't accept out of devotion." Okay, period. So that is a great, statement, Buddha made. So he wants us to investigate, his teachings and the truths that he has spoken about. And if we find them as he said it, then accept it, but just not because, we think he's a Buddha and then we just kind of jump on the bandwagon. Don't do that. Buddha didn't like that one. Okay, and so in the case of goldsmith, right? Khensur was chuckling over that. How Tibetans have those kind of wise sayings in the matter. When you're going to buy a gold or something, they're like, make sure you don't get a fake gold. Everything that glitters is not a gold. So figure it out. So how do we figure it out? In the old way, you can cut it. If it's just like painted gold, well, the true color will show up. Well, there is a other thing here, metal, right? Or you burn it, right? The real gold, it gets refined. The gold shines even more. It doesn't disappear or something. You burn it, or you cut it. So through those ways, this is real gold, refined gold, but this is a copper or something, Yeah. So in the same way, we should investigate Buddha's teachings through different kinds of reasonings. That's why we talk about three types of reasoning. Anyway, he didn't mention this. So I'm not going to go there. And test it, and if we find the truth in what Buddha said, then we should accept it, not because we like him or we respect him. Don't do that. Okay? And so that is the message given here, that if things were to exist intrinsically, which is a fabricated reality, right? Now we really want to know whether they do exist in that way or not. We do ultimate analysis, and under that analysis, we don't find it to exist that way. Okay? So that tells us that the kind of reality we thought it is there, it is not there. So it is our mental projection. So therefore, oftentimes there is the use of the term deceptive on top of page 217, just like we get deceived that mirage is a water, and it's not. Okay, just as we thought there is a like wheel over there. Well, no, that's just as we thought. There's a whole like an army kind of attacking us. Well, it's a magical creation. So in the same way, we have to test the realities. Otherwise, we might get cheated or deceived by our perceptions. No.
Oh, that's a Kashaki, not doing that. That's lower.
The Shannon do so long.
They la.
They charge it to what?
Oh, they come a what that can't the machine Ralu Kajang Songatala, which is Tonse and what Kajasan, Joro Major, the Tondong Chapter Charme, some Yorva. I think the Tanguni Bunny, the Lord, Asumba Karisan, any Kajaton, Kajala Tondom Chapter Joro Major, at the Hidiori, what that is, Mogazi, I drink the Kasia. Any common Kajan do, Jalayan, Konjara Nagi, no. Ten men, I need to say, I soon do food, not to drink, fishing Yangaki, and the Sondo food. Yeah, it's not a cheese.
So I think it's good that we've completed that one sub point, and the next one that follows is on page 217, which is called whether to add the qualification ultimate to the object of negation. So we will pick it up, next time, and we have a couple of minutes. We'd like you to give you the chance to ask questions, make observations. Then after that, we know today is the 25th. Day according to lunar calendar, so we also need to do sock offering, the Vajrayogini. Okay, so please.
So I have a question. So you have two people sitting here. One's a Buddhist and one's not a Buddhist. Okay, and they all can sit here and rationale. Okay, you have conventional existence, and that's pretty powerful because we live in conventional, and that's how we create all this karma.
Right.
And they both can accept that. Okay, you can't find it. The ultimate reality, we understand that. Now the Buddhist will go ahead and take it one step further and say, I better be a good person because, things are not existing. We go that way and we start accepting that. And the non-Buddhist will say, okay, it's irrelevant. I mean, if there's convention on ultimate reality, I'm not going to do anything. You see, and so I'm sitting here, what causes us to take the next step to react? Because we live in conventional, and that's what we have to deal with, even though it's really pretty powerful. It's like the ultimate, and what furthers the Buddhist path is a conclusion, right? So I'm kind of confused what makes us go one step further and say, oh, I better be compassionate now, and the other one will say, so what?
Thank you, yeah, I got it. Morang condition the Dirisha, that can sort of say, Takanda Dega Sungusana, Pena Takaso. 최담제 탄이도 이어봐라. 다 템버러 랑웨 텐데바 머르버치 시고라. 다 이게 남사 소리스로와.
라리.
제대로 갈다 뭐랑 돼서 그렇게 시대 강사니 이어봐지 직 낭바 이바 차샤. 직 치바 이바 차샤. 다 본인이가 이 돈다로도 고바 차샤로와. 탄이도 이어봐서긴다 돈담도 매봐서긴다 고바 차샤. 다 낭바 이바 차네 다 삼라다 오야 다 최담정원에 탄이도 다디 이네 다 돈담바 요말인데 선상 가라 칼소고다. 그러나 지 가서 강사인에 다지 상부를 제구고도 봐. 진행지 제구도 되게 삼식을 해서 봐. 다고 남과 명예를 봐. 탄제 유네데 전단의 면에다디 나라는 게 개박에 민도로 봐지 그게 민도 샤식으로 와. 세상 다 뭐라 전다 줘도 돼 말다. 뭐라 제와 수단을 비슷도 가라. 디 템베닐로데 하고네 에는 가서 직반에 인지 제고야다로 봐. 아니 미나 상부 제고야다. 디데기 직다 로제슬리고로 봐. 디 칸데슬리고 그래서 그 템바자미 임바 레샤데 말에 말 샤시 만디베체. 당문에 된다발 민도로 봐. 디데 송자다 지 장바인에 직 장바 제고 인지 제고 사주로 와. 디 삼로 당다로 간den스.
that's. 디 케브자 요 말이 다 तावे टोला मिटुमसने मिटु सिटु मेंटाबा युने या इंजि मेंजि थों तंबर दुबा त मडुबा सेनजि सेनजा के मालेनि दिगरिता रबा गाजेने छोलु खासुत सुइने जे छांबा युंगे निंजे युंगे सेंबेंग लापचा संपो युंगे ते चिक्जुरि दिवारे तेसि नांबा इनायनरा सेबा इनायनरा मि सेंबेंग लापचा याबुसिरा युंगे चिक्जुरि दिवारे तावे टोले मेंराबा टिम्बु योरे छेबा योरे नांबा इना या नांबा टुटा छेबा माबाते तावाची जुरखे लेंगे मा तावा तेते मेंराबा 계량게 되게 이라게 되게 누구야 말이지. 여기 주변 차 탐지대 시장자부터 상반년지의 길향이야. 용어들이 말 될라 수인나데 쇼케 말량기나인다 량게이나인다 상바다 년지 신이데 거래 시샤도 야랍주상 통용 그래 대실 마샤베 톤 직전에 야랍주상에 때 공부체가 될 다베 톤 제버라 민도 나발
What Khensur says is that, regardless of our faiths, whether we believe in certain religion or don't believe at all, to be a better human being or more compassionate, it doesn't necessarily have to be tied up with some philosophical understanding of the realities or not, because across the religions, what we hear, some of the common message is, love, compassion, and all of that. We know that, there are philosophical differences between Buddhist schools of thought and non-Buddhist schools of thought. Even within Buddhism, right, we don't necessarily buy into the same philosophical matter. There's so many differences, But just to be a better person, more compassionate, more loving, more caring, it doesn't really necessarily have to do with realizing the philosophical reality or the ultimate reality of things, So it is, I think, it falls in different category of things, what he thinks. So a non-Buddhist can equally be equally compassionate and loving. That's his point. It doesn't have to do with whether they understood the ultimate nature of things or not. That doesn't matter. Does it somehow? Yeah.
Yeah.
Question is, Rinpoche didn't mention there was a different concept here, imaginary constructs on page 215 as the third category of things that do not exist at all. So the category of things that you don't need to add the qualification intrinsically. And I assume that refers to divine creator. But why not karma? Again, why not karma also fall in this category? Or even the wheel of a firebrand, since it's an imaginary thing.
Right.
Why isn't it an imaginary construct? And in that sense, just like a divine creator and karma, there would be no need for adding the qualification intrinsically or ultimately.
Oh, you mean to the karma, you mean?
Yeah, well, and the wheel of a firebrand, because it's an imaginary thing.
Right.
We're projecting something.
Yeah, I remember that he didn't really.
He didn't talk about
explain
so this is the third
imaginary,
category of here in the book. It sounds like it's the third category of things that do not exist at all. So you don't need to add a qualification. But even karma is like that, and even the will of a firebrand is like that in a way because it's an imaginary construct.
Yeah, the
or maybe
firebrand
not.
is imaginary construct, right? But how about the karma? How do you say it's imaginary?
No, well, if the firebrand, I shouldn't accept it. So you shouldn't accept it so quickly, because if it's an imaginary construct, that means it doesn't exist at all. Not just ultimately, but even conventionally. So please don't accept what I said.
Quran ke diri sha the session na rona says in sara wa ta Khensur mo je di chabe di na la ta ki di ba Khensur mo che ta jandam ki kya ba ja ko mago sa mangu sum ro wa sawa ni me na ja ko mare ta dine kar sa kap da twil yo ba yor di ya me ba yor de la ja ko mangu chu sum ro wa sum ba de ya this is your da Khensur mo je di tanye de pe na ma so ro wa ine da di sare the previous chapter did not talk to sense to it. Talk by server. Because I'm just trying to get what's the Tibetan word exactly in these texts, the imaginary construct. Right. Okay, so maybe I can ask your question. Yeah.
Karma is the same thing.
Right.
We don't see it. Why should we believe that? And even firebrand, will of firebrand, that's even that is a projection. It's a construct. So there must be a difference between these three.
The Quran this figure that when the easy thing this room is shown that the begin al kare no just talk that sig where is that exactly the imaginary? I remember.
In the middle of the last paragraph of page 215.
Okay, in the middle of two.
Furthermore, when refuting imaginary constructs.
Oh yes. Ala tagi this song nangba da chibe gi slarwa and tumo maing be so ke duju ta tok be service ngi tung ge sa be tin so chabe na do tok be service ngi
tok be service tok da si
tok da tok da
tok da yi ji
tok da se che ro wa
di
la lo So dila ine slavrowa dila ine any doing the make about jago marisumrowa. Talk survey ine. Says that Quran that what they should. Yeah, now we got it at the same page because he closed his book, so I don't know where he's but just a talk about survey chela and kisi karsa the doing the make about jago menasrowa. And talk about survey chair in a keba yomar spend a game color job they talk about server they call me about color. In a tap and a legend they say and they talk about server marco young your was. Talk about server now that then we cover jack was the marco so the day cover yomar. Talk about server chair now.
Talk about survey chola.
In a that's someone to what them do me ever say. Then talk about the game color the make you tune out with the day and I could talk so they go yomarwa. Time in a legend they talk about server marva. I'm going to make it like a yomar slow jim there. Talk about legend dead over the day and a young colleague jaguar over the day keba yomar vesa. Then we keba jack was the most.
Legend on them jag marva. Jagumare. And the top of Susie at the Sissy or that and soon to the Sissung to her. Tanta maybe chili you were rotan. Ranju would drop a check Rangon to bata, Tambra, Tambra, Martha, Rangon to bata, Raji to bata, Tindes, maybe Yorata. Can you wait on Tawan in Medraba? Maybe Chilla Tobea, Sunia, any Rangon to buy you, any PH, Ranjij to buy you, Tindes and Munji to buy you, they talk about Trotas, it is. They talk about Trotas, it is. Madoche Karsota, talk by in the Tamjelo, talk about Trotas, Maravata. For maybe you bata in the talk about Trota, but Tondole any Pigati or Karsura. Chat Tondam Gichaba Java in a Ranju Koran and Dubegi, Ranji Tomato, take out your mares. Go up John Dugumar, called Tanji Kong, few time, but up John Dugumares. Koran in Dube, Ton Tamper Matu Tessin, Chabina. Kacha Tichabi and Abdul Yaris. Ton number Matubati, in Dubla, Rangaji Matubate.
No.
Can't do yours. Start with you together, Veti, Yinea, most Tigichama, Caberti Yaris. Lendela Tontam Caberta, Comaguta, Lendea Tontamper, you the Messiati, Carmos, Janet, Castle Jaja, Kuyo Marte, Jacoyo Marcunzi, Tuntul, Jacoyo Mare. Lende Meberta, and Lende Yuber to Joko, Lende Yuber Ton Tamberta, Telaya, and Lende Ton Tamber to be Lende, your Maris in a charge over your Captain charge you raise.
No, sir. No. I think probably this might kind of, I think, untie the whole issue. In the Tibetan term, where is the transfer imaginary construct, I think where maybe you think is like the position is that everything that exists is what called imputed by terms and concepts, right? That kind of imputation and imaginary construct, which is used here, these are two different things. The imaginary construct here is to be understood in terms of fabricated realities. Things don't exist, but we create that they exist. The example given in the philosophical context is, according to Prasangikas, Seventh-Dandaka Madhyamikas thinks that things exist intrinsically. But according to Prasangika, that is their imaginary construct because there is no such thing as intrinsic reality. Okay? So in that sense, the mirage as water and they go well, but not the karma part. Karma, yes, created by terms and concepts, but it's a different category. And so in the case of karmas also, he thinks like there are people who don't believe in karma at all, right? They think they don't exist at all. That is one position. Or those who think it exists, but it exists intrinsically, they have fallen on another extreme, right? We can think about that, right? So that's why those are two different imaginary constructs and imputed by terms and concepts are maybe two different things. Not maybe, two different things, you know. Everything that exists is imputed by terms and concepts, but everything that's imputed does not necessarily exist. You know, there's a distinction between, how things are imputed by terms and concepts, but everything that we impute does not necessarily have to exist. So the imaginary concepts are a category of that. Something that doesn't exist, but we think it exists. Yeah.
Okay. So in that sense, were you going to ask a question? No. Does that? Are you saying that? Is the Rinpoche saying that imaginary constructs doesn't refer specifically to divine creator and things like that, the Hindu concepts?
Okay. So yeah.
Because that's my understanding. Later on, actually, they do talk about divine creators.
that there was talk about Choda said in Alia, Pena, Jigden Kobo Sechorwa, didn't a sugar Marisa, Jigden Chebo Sechorwa, Penny Hindu Chulunalia, Onju Cheber Sechorwa.
What is
He
it?
talked with Sever Dakatan, Choda tell sugar to Maris.
Oh, two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a divine creator is a part of imaginary concept.
Okay. So, and this is the thing that doesn't exist even conventionally.
Right. So they call it Cheba body, Tanya to Yomaris or what? Yeah. That's right. According to Person Mathematics, yes, there is no creator, even divine creator conventionally. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think Khensur wants to talk to you in English. He said, okay, now you got it. All right. So, well, thank you very much. That was very good, I think, discussion. Let's do dedication, and we will do the short dedication because we have a chalk offering, so I don't want to hold everybody and do the same thing over again. So take a 10-minute break, answer the nature's call, set the chalk table, and then we'll be back.